that Ishmael, the firstborn, is also the descendant of Abraham, and that he too has a prophecy in God's word that describes the role that he will play at the end of the world. And you can find this in Genesis 16, verse 12. Speaking of Ishmael, it says, and he will be a wild man. It's worth taking note that this word that is translated wild here is a root word that is connected with the wild Arabian ass. In fact, sometimes when it's translated in the Bible, it's translated as ass. Okay? But donkey, ass, wild Arabian ass is how it is sometimes translated. I'm making that point to let you know that right from the very start, Ishmael is associated with the horse. Okay? Because when we get to Revelation chapter 9, Islam is represented by the horse. That's why Brother Jamal was making sure that he emphasized those passages in chapter 9 when he was dealing with the first and second woe. And it is obvious that that is the pioneer understanding of the symbol of Islam in chapter 9, because when the pioneers came together to symbolically represent Islam on these two sacred charts, they are represented here by the horse, the war horse. Of course, when they were to correct that chart in 1850, they still represented Islam by the horse. So when it's giving us the prophecy of Ishmael's descendants, it says he will be a wild man, and his hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. Brothers and sisters, I don't know that we'll get this far along in Ishmael. We're going to deal with some things, but I'd like to point out to you here that the United States in verse 14 of Revelation 13 forces the world to accept a one world government. It's easy to demonstrate. You may not have understood this before, but there's only one definition of the image of the beast given in inspiration, and it's the combination of church and state, with the church in control of the relationship. There's only one definition of the image of the beast given in inspiration. It's a combination of church and state, with the church in control of the relationship. And in verse 14 of Revelation 13, the United States goes to the whole world and commands them that they should set up an image of the beast. In verse 14 of Revelation 13, by definition, it demands that the United States is telling the world that they come under the umbrella of a one world government. And this one world government is spoken of many times in Bible prophecy. This is the one world government of Revelation 17:17, where the 10 kings, which represent the United Nations in Revelation 17, agree to give their kingdom to the beast, the papacy, at the end of the world. And this one world image of the beast, combination of church and state, with the papacy in control of the relationship. So we're not taking time to look at this in Revelation 13 and 17. It is very defendable. It is defended very well on the 2004 Prophecy School and other presentations. But my point is this. This is not just a random happening. There is a specific reason why this happens. And the reason that it happens is that the descendants of Ishmael, Islam, their hand is going to be against every man's hand in the world. And they are to create such a crisis as they bring on the third jihad that every man's hand in the world, through the organization that we call the United Nations, is to come together against them. So I want you to at least understand that this prophecy here in Genesis 16 has a specific and direct connection to end-time Bible prophecy. It's not just about the fact that the descendants of Ishmael are crazy men, because they are. Right? How crazy is it to walk into a room with bombs attached to yourself and suddenly and unexpectedly blow yourself up? Okay, that's pretty extreme. But from my understanding. As you look at Ishmael in sacred history, and we've touched upon this before, throughout their history in the Old Testament, New Testament, and after the biblical era, in the time all the way through the Reformation, Islam, the descendants of Ishmael, in the Old Testament called the children of the East, often and primarily. They were a double-edged sword, and what I mean like that is they fulfilled two purposes. When ancient Israel was disobedient, the Lord would allow the descendants of Ishmael to attack them, punish them, bring judgment upon them. But there are still several places in the Old Testament where it's obvious that the Lord was using the descendants of Ishmael to provide deliverance to God's people. We've mentioned some before. Take Joseph to Egypt, providing the finances to carry Christ into Egypt to protect him from Herod. They're a double-edged sword all the way through history. One of the clearest symbols of Islam at the end of the world is Balaam. We've mentioned this before too. You'll see a couple notes on the bottom of this page here dealing with Balaam. He was hired to curse Israel just before they went into the Promised Land in Numbers 22, which is a clear illustration of modern Israel just before they go into the real Promised Land. And Balaam there is attempting to bless or curse Israel, but all he can do is bless Israel. This is the double-edged story of Islam, and Balaam is associated with the children of the East, and the children of the East in the Old Testament is the descendants of Ishmael. He's representing once again at the end of the world the role of Islam in both being a blessing and a curse. And this is also represented, as Jamal pointed out, in the first woe, the fifth trumpet, in the warfare that Islam was bringing during the time period of Abu Bakr, as it was going out against Catholic Christianity and forcing the Catholics to become Muslims or die. They were given a command to hurt not those Christians that were Sabbath keepers. They provided a protection for those Sabbath keepers during that time period, just as they provided a protection for Martin Luther in the Reformation. And Martin Luther, in his writings, in the early part of his writings, called Islam the deliverer of the Reformation. He later called them the Antichrist, but nevertheless, in the beginning, he understood that providentially they were the force that was protecting the Reformation. So they're double-edged sword. Throughout all their history, descendants of Ishmael have been both a blessing and a curse, as illustrated with Balaam. Going to the next page. Well, let's turn there. Revelation 11. As Jamal pointed out, the second woe is not marked as ending until verse 14 of Revelation 11. And the reason for this, of course, is that the trumpets, and that includes the fifth and sixth trumpet, which are the first and second woe, are the providential forces that would punish or bring down Rome. The first four trumpets brought down Western Rome by 476. The fifth and sixth trumpet would bring down Eastern Rome in 1453 and bring down Papal Rome in 1798. In the second woe, the sixth trumpet, you have illustrated not simply Islam alone, but because the second trumpet, the second woe, does not end until after the French Revolution, here in verse 14 of Revelation 11, then we also see the role of atheism, which is the dragon power, and the part that they played in delivering the deadly wound to Papal Rome in 1798. Therefore, one of the characteristics of the second woe is not simply Islam, but also the atheism of the French Revolution. And of course, France in Revelation 11 is one of the 10 parts of this kingdom. The kingdom is divided into 10 parts, and the kingdom in Bible prophecy is divided into 10 parts as pagan Rome. And one part of that 10-fold kingdom was France. It's France that suffered the earthquake in Revelation 11, being the French Revolution. But that kingdom that was divided into 10 parts was pagan Rome. And Sister White tells us, we read it from the Great Controversy, that it's the dragon power. Therefore, France, atheistic France, that brings the deadly wound, represents the dragon power. Therefore, when you take 1 and 2 and add them together, what do you get? 3. So when you take the characteristics of the first woe and the second woe and add them together, you get the characteristics of the third woe. So when the third woe arrives in history on September 11, 2001, you don't simply see Islam. You can see in that third woe the activities of the dragon power. This is worth knowing if you understand this message and you're going to teach it, because one of the stumbling blocks for us Seventh-day Adventists is as soon as we say that it is Islam that fulfilled September 11, 2001, everyone in the room says, doesn't Brother Pippenger know anything about those conspiracy DVDs that are out there that says it was the globalists that brought down the Twin Towers? And most certainly I know about those. But it was Islam that was being marked prophetically at that time, even if the globalists had some behind-the-scenes part to play. That still fits within the characteristics of the second woe. But brothers and sisters, the prophetic testimony is what we need to recognize when the third woe arrives, is Islam has returned. Islam that is marking this event for us.
Who is the lover? Allah. Who is Ar-Rahman? Allah. Who is Al-Mannan? La ilaha illallah. Muhammadur Rasulullah. Muhammad is the messenger. Allah is our